we'll dismiss around 7:15. There's a youth activity tomorrow, so our teens are invited to go ice skating from 1 o'clock until 5. So they'll meet in their youth room at 1 and return back here at 5. They'll need $10 as members of our church or $15 for non-members. What we do in a situation like that for our kids, we want to offset some of the expense. So if you're a member, you assume that members tithe, right? So we have a budget and we give to help with that. That's what that is, because we'll have several school kids come, and we want them to come and be a part. But also, if you have 40 kids, 40 times 5 is a lot of money. So we want them to, take care of their extra 5. But we'll do it for our kids, to help them out. Graduation is Friday night at 7, if you'd like to come and be here for that. We have a couple of our own students who are graduating. I have one. And so we still need nursery help. Let's see, the Fennels said that no one has talked to them yet. And I think it was Bill who said, warn them that we're going to start coming to you. Anyway, so they said, what's the need? Well, Wednesday nights right now, I think they have basically 2 weeks out of 4 covered with people. So that means we need at least 4 workers to help out on Wednesdays. Sundays, we need to open up both, because they have 7 to 8 kids in one nursery. I can't remember what the number was, but it was like 3 or 4 babies under 1, and then about the same amount in the just over 1 to 3-year-olds. And so you can imagine the difficulty there of having a little one with a 3-year-old toddler running around. So anyway, if you can help out with that, please see Carissa. You could also see Casey about that, and they could help you. Next week, instead of having our Wednesday night service, okay, so we're kicking off the summer, and we're going to just blow up the schedule, okay? What do I mean? Next Wednesday, no church. Instead, we're moving it to Friday. And what we'll do is we're going to have a family game night. What does game night mean? We're going to do board games. So if you have board games or a card game that you really enjoy, please come. And we're going to meet at 6:30. We're going to meet over in the gymnasium. We'll have some tables set up over there. Bring your favorite, if you'd like. You can bring your favorite snack, like board game night snack, sweet or salty, and enough, some to share. And we'll have some snacks set up and games, and we'll just have a nice little time together as a church family, enjoying some fellowship on Friday night. So no Wednesday night service, but we're going to move the gathering to Friday for a game night. And then senior adults, note here, number 6 on the announcements, senior adult picnic on June 4th, and that'll be at noon right out here. So we look forward to that every year, having a picnic and enjoying the fellowship together. So we'll probably do a sign-up sheet so we know how much food to plan for that. But if you can bring a side or dessert, that's always welcome and enjoyed. So we enjoy that doing that. I like to be a part of picnics. A lot of fun. All right, let's turn our Bibles tonight, and we're going to go to the book of Genesis chapter 31. Genesis 31. We are happy to have some guests here with us tonight. And let's see, you folks moved from Texas, is that right? Yes, sir. To Bradenton. Great. Now, remind me your names. Emily. Kyle. All right, well, welcome. We're glad to have you all here tonight, part of our Wednesday night. This is very informal. That's how we do this. It's on purpose. So I just go through and ask a lot of questions, and so then people give answers. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we give the answers, right? We try hard based upon what we read in Scripture. So we're in Genesis 31 here tonight. I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but we are going to try to get through the whole thing here tonight. So hold on tight, because here we go. The title is The Long Road Home. And I think you'll see why that bears that title here this evening. Jacob, of course, has been serving his father-in-law. Now, to this point, he will mention it in the passage for 20 years. 7 years he waited to marry Rachel, and then he was deceived into taking Leah, right? And then he worked 7 more years. So now he's got 2 wives. That makes life easy. And then he agrees to work to gain his own wealth, and he, in the Jacob way, the supplanter way, tricks his father-in-law, who is a professional trickster, into breeding the animals. And he breeds them in such a way where he gets the spotted ones and striped ones, and his father-in-law gets all the weak ones. And he wins out, and we get to chapter 31, and notice how it starts. In Genesis 31, it says right from the beginning, and he heard, this is Jacob, heard the words of Laban's sons saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. So in other words, their interpretation of what has happened is that Jacob took all of our family wealth. Now, Jacob did it all above board, right? The Lord blessed him. It says, and Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. And the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, or his face, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered or allowed him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring-straked shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring-straked. Now, he had a part in that, right? Of course, the Lord did, but he knew how the breeding process. Verse 9, thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. It came to pass at that time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, here am I. And he said, lift up now thine eye and see. All the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out of this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. And so God had commanded him to leave, to get back to the land of his family, that God had promised to this family, the promised land, Israel. And so here we are in chapter 31. As we look at the long road home, God has commanded him to go back home. So he says to his wives, okay, it's time to leave your dad. Now, they've lived with dad all their lives. And so he brings this up to them, and we'll get to what they have to say in just a moment. But you can see that he is now fallen out of favor. What caused Laban's attitude to change concerning Jacob? Remember in the previous chapter how Laban felt about Jacob? He felt great. He said, hey, you tell me what your wages will be. That's what he said. Assign the wages to me, and or you assign it to yourself, and I'll pay you that.
Not only did his sons feel they took all that was their father's, they felt he's taken our inheritance.
Good. Yes, they felt like he's taken our inheritance, the wealth that, Dad, you would have had, but that passes on to us, right? Good. Was there a hand over there? Same thing. All right, yeah, good. So you can see when what is most important to you is taken away, what happens? Well, we get kind of upset about it, right? So often when I pray for the offering, for instance, I will talk about an expression of love. Why do I say that? Because money is very important to us. Why is money important to us? You have to have it to live, right? And, okay, so I had a conversation with one of my daughters last night, my oldest daughter, Julia. I said, Julia, I just want to talk to you about giving. I said, the Lord has always blessed your mom and me. And I said, I believe that's because we've always been faithful in our giving. Even when things were really tight, we always tithed. We never skipped it. I said, I remember a time in 2008. I said, you were very young, and Lydia was a baby. And we were, the gas prices had gone up to like $4.25. You guys, everybody remember that? And it was really hard. And I remember we were like 2 or 3 days away from when we would get paid. And we had $23 left in our account that day. Everybody has one of these stories, right? And so ours is this, and this is real. And so I went to get gas because our tank was, we're not going to make it the next 2 or 3 days, whatever it is. And so I went to get gas. It was like $4 a gallon. And so I got $20 worth of gas because I had 23, 25, whatever it was in our account. And so it's just, 4 or 5 gallons in a Honda Accord at the time. And it was sufficient to get us there. The Lord always took care of our needs. But I said, what I've realized about money is everything's the Lord's anyway. So if I just give, I said, he's given me, whatever the amount is, and all he, quote unquote, requires of me is 10%. He says, you get 90%. All I'll ask is 10%. And I said, the Lord has never left us wanting. I said, we're laying up treasures in heaven by focusing on the spiritual side of things, but we're also giving. And we're showing that we love the Lord. And this is not a message on giving, but I'm just showing you money is important to us, right? And what's important to us will drive us, and it will affect our attitude as well. So, for instance, if you're struggling financially, it affects your countenance. If you're having a hard time financially, it will affect things. Why do I say that? Right here. Right? So, that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. Like, he's the successful one, and he did it because he took it from us. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. When everything was good and he was doing great because of Jacob, he was happy. When he no longer had the wealth, but Jacob had it, even though he did it in a righteous way, according to what they had set up, he was upset. Why? Because money was more important than the relationship. Right? He cared more about their financial well-being than he did about his own family. How do I know that? Because later on the daughters say, we have no inheritance from our father. He doesn't even care about us. So yeah, take us away. It's really a sad thing when we consider that money had become so important to them. How did God use, how did God use Laban's attitude, if you will, in Jacob's life? How did he use this situation in Jacob's life? Verse 3. So it says, and the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. So how did the Lord use this situation? Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, so the Lord says, go away, right? The Lord communicates that directly. Go back to the land of your family. And if he was maybe lingering for a month or two, wondering, I wonder if the Lord really meant that. Well, Laban's countenance changes. He says, I guess so, right? Now, this is not, you shouldn't go back to this passage and say, well, this is how the Lord tells me it's time to move on or go somewhere else. What we like to do is we like to take texts in the Bible and make them say what we want them to say. And it's a dangerous thing to do that. Well, the Lord told me I need to get up and go home. This is home. So all I'm saying is, in this situation, go back to the land that was promised. You've been here for 20 years. It's time to go back. And the Lord used the countenance or the attitude of his father-in-law to kind of to confirm that it is time to go. Do you envy what Jacob had to do next? And why was it necessary? Look at verse 4. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me, and ye know that with all my power I have served your father. Okay, so let's go there. Do you envy what Jacob had to do here, and why was it necessary? Okay, first of all, what did he have to do? Okay, sneak out. But what did he do before he snuck out? Okay, yeah, he had to talk to his wives, right? Is that important, men? Okay, it's her father. I mean, and how would you like it if you just said, hey, girls, we're going? What do you mean we're going? I've lived here all my life. A conversation, communication, explaining. God said this to me. We need to go. I've served your dad, but he's been, you know your dad, and he has this conversation. I don't envy Jacob here, but why was this necessary? Because, well, it's his daughters, it's the in-laws, and they've never lived anywhere else, and now you're going to say we have to go somewhere else. And so what needs to happen is they need to be on the same page, right? Do you think Jacob was afraid he might lose his wives to their father? Look at verse 6. You know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me, changed my wages 10 times, but God allowed him not to hurt me. And if he said thus, the speckled shall, and so on, thus God, verse 9, hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. Do you think Jacob was afraid he might lose his wives to their father? Okay, yeah, I think that's a good answer, Brother Hauser. Could be. I think that's a good answer because look what he has to say to them, right? I think it could be that he's afraid he's going to lose them to the father, but also they might go back to dad, right, and stick around rather than going with him. And so I think there's clearly some concern. What change do you notice in Jacob from earlier in his life in verses 9 through 13? What do you notice here that's different from earlier in his life? Okay, he's given God all the credit, right? He's saying God hath done this. God. He just keeps bringing up his God. I don't know how much of this had been done in the last 20 years. We know that it had been done in chapter 30 when he was talking about the animals, gaining his own wealth for his family so he could take care of them. Titus? Oh, sure. Good. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Titus. Titus is bringing out that he is really working to bring out truth here. He's a deceiver, right? His name even means that, but his father-in-law is even more masterful at deception. And so naturally what you're going to do is you're going to one-up the other person, and so he could have easily done that, but instead what he's doing here is he's just sharing information that they know, but he's saying it because by saying it, you're kind of reinforcing the truth, and he just tells what the truth is. He's changed my wages 10 times, and then he explains, look, we agreed on the whole speckled thing, and God just kept making them speckled, and it's just worked, great. So yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the big change you see here is the difference between Jacob and Laban. What you're seeing here, Laban's concerned about success. Jacob now is concerned about obedience and doing what the Lord wants, and that's so important with us. Not looking at, how can I be the most successful, the next step up in life. I appreciated that all my life about my dad. From the time I was a little guy, my dad, the job was to work 8 to 5. And so work 8 to 5. My dad asked if he could work start at 7, an hour earlier, take a half an hour lunch, and get done at 3:30 because his kids get out of school at 3:30, and he wanted to be home with his kids. Well, my dad did that from a very young age. My dad never left, that I can ever remember, a day of vacation. He used every single minute of vacation that he had, right down to the last bit. He had 7 kids. He had a lot of things going on. My dad showed what was important to him by his choices in life. And I think what we're seeing here is true of Laban and Jacob, and what we're seeing is they're drifting apart. When they came together, Jacob and Laban were very similar. Now, as they're drifting apart, naturally what happens is people who want to follow the Lord naturally drift away from people who don't. It's just natural. That's what the scriptures talk about. Separation is a very natural thing. We don't even like to talk about it. But it's what happens. A person who is a committed follower of Jesus is not naturally going to hang around with somebody who is involved in sinful practices because his conscience smites him. I can't do that. He's under conviction all the time. And so here you see this separation that's taking place. Was it hard for Jacob to convince his wives? Look at verse 14. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion of or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. What do you get? Do you get from that it was hard for Jacob to convince his wives? Not at all. What does that tell you about Laban? Mm-hmm.
He considered his family property to be gained financially from, not his daughters. They were property to profit off of.
Sure, absolutely, and you're going to see that later on in the chapter, right? Especially they were property to proffer from, and once they weren't very profitable, they weren't very valuable, right, to him, and that's sad. And by the way, our kids are not a tax benefit, right? Ooh, I get child tax credit for having kids. So I better have 10 of them, It's great. Or whatever, Larry. You forgot. Sorry. Good. Not good about that. So the next point here, sneaking out. So what does verse 16 indicate about this family? For all the riches with God, which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. What does verse 16 indicate about this family? When I say this family, I mean about Jacob's family. What are you seeing here? Mm-hmm. Amen. Yeah, so they're seeing 2 different kind of leaders, one that's in it for himself and one that's following the Lord, and they're saying, wow, the one who's following the Lord's taken care of, we're with you. And I think this family, they're a developing family, I think. When I say that spiritually, they're developing. We'll get to verse 19 in a second, and there are different views on that one, but we'll look at that. How did Jacob leave? So verse 17, then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all the goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. Okay, so how did he leave? Snuck away, right? Sneaking out. So why might he have done that, Barry? Oh, yeah. I think that's a great point. He mentioned that the old Jacob still shows up. It's like all of us, right? We call it the flesh, that old remnant that hangs around with us, even though our spirit wants to follow the Lord, but the flesh is weak, right? So Jacob still feared, even though God said, go to your land, go back to the land. He was still going to do it his way, to a degree.
He wasn't confrontational.
No, he wasn't. He was passive in many ways.
That's why he would
Yep, sneak.
away.
Yep, that's right. Why else sneak away? But that, I think there was a fear of Laban. Yes.
I think two things. One, I think he was afraid his father-in-law might talk him into staying,
Okay, good.
raise his wages.
Yep.
And the other thing I think he was afraid of was his father-in-law could have reneged and said, "You only get half the speckled and spotted. You don't get all."
Sure. I think you bring up great points that if he stayed, maybe father-in-law would kind of change the deal and just try to, hey, stay and I'll pay you more and you'll get more. Or he may have tried to steal part of the, what he had received. Yeah.
I think it would have been easier on his wives just to go, not have to say goodbye. Let's just get
Okay, that's a great point. Maybe easier on his wives. Let's just go. It makes it a whole lot easier than the whole goodbye thing. I learned that when I got married into the McNaughton family. They say goodbyes for a long time. They hug and they cry and they just drag it out. Clark, you're very quiet back there, Clark. Clark is not a hugger. And then my family's like, yeah, there he goes. My family is like, see ya, kind of like that, just goodbye. Whatever. We don't even say goodbye. It's just kind of like we're like Jacob. We just sneak out, and
Well, after 3 days, relatives are like fish. They start stinking.
that's right. Relatives do start stinking after 3 days. All right, so let's deal with this elephant here that's in verse number 19. Oh, Donna. Okay. Okay, good question. How did they not know that he was leaving? What does the text tell us that Laban was doing? What was he doing? Shearing the sheep. So this is a whole process. It's not like today. They actually, have you watched it ever? They shear a sheep in like a minute. I mean, they just zzz, but back then they actually had to have shears and clip them off. So it would have taken a long time. So this would have been a process. Depending on how many he had, he would have been at his farm. He would have been doing this. I don't know how close it was, but this would have taken some time. And Jacob knew this. This is the time to go. I'm sure this was all lined up this way. This is the time to go. Get out of town. It would have taken him probably days to take care of the whole shearing of the sheep. Word gets back. They left. Like, you're right. And he has all the cattle, right? And all the animals, the herds. And so he gets out of town. He gets a 3-day jump on him. Yes.
I was thinking the same as her, but when you just said that, the sheep are in a different kind of land than cattle are now that you said.
Sure. And they have both, right? They have sheep, goats, and cattle.
The piece on the sheep, that makes a little more sense now. I was wondering the same thing she was wondering.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fair because it's like, okay, you're on this plot of land, we're on this plot of land, let's sneak out. Yeah, Donna says something about a big fat camel. How do they get out of town without being noticed, right?
It says in chapter 30 that there was a 3 days journey
Between the two. Well, that's what they did. They had set up that.
so they could be gone.
Yeah, they moved. Yeah, they moved a good distance apart from each other. Good question. It's fair. Okay, so I mentioned this elephant here, verse 19. What do you think? What should we glean from verse 19? Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. Okay, the question was, is that talking about gods? So, most likely, yes. The gods, these idols that the family probably would have bowed down to. So, what can we glean about this? Curious, yes.
I have to wonder if she was thinking, we get no inheritance, I'm going to take my inheritance.
Okay. Very fair. He brings up, she's thinking, we're not going to get any inheritance because we just talked about that in the text, right? I'm going to get mine. Most likely, what were these images made out of? Yeah, gold, precious metals of some sort. And so that's a very strong possibility. Did Jacob know about this? Not a clue. We know he didn't know about it because he said, whoever has done this, kill him. That's what he says. Well, who's his favorite wife? Well, Rachel. Barry? Okay. Okay, yeah, he brings up a great point. I think there's probably resentment there, especially there's no inheritance left for us. It was valuable to him, so let's take this from him. There's a little bit of not too much loss for love there with that perspective. Yes.
We spent a lot of time, he served the 7 years, and it felt like nothing for Rachel, and then he gets tricked when he gets Leah. Nobody ever says anything about Rachel. Maybe Rachel was as much in love with him as he was with her, and her father wouldn't let her marry him because he said, I'm going to get rid of my older daughter. And maybe she really resented that.
Yeah, again, more resentment, quite possibly. Yeah.
It made me wonder if she took the gods just in case, not truly dependent on God, just, well, take these.
Okay, I think that's right. I think that's very fair. She mentioned maybe there was still that connection to home, and this is a backup, just in case his God doesn't work. I'll take these gods with me, right? And that'll be a backup plan.
Yeah, I'd heard somewhere, I think, that whoever had the family gods got the spiritual blessing the more. So maybe she was using that as, maybe
Protecting him.
thinking she was going to get rewarded blessings
Yeah.
out of having these. Maybe she wasn't fully committed to the God of the Bible.
Which is interesting because those gods had not helped Laban, right? The God that her husband is following is the one that had honored and blessed. But God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. It's not an image that you bow down to. And she was maybe pursuing an image. I think there are many possibilities. Does the Bible tell us? No. So what does that leave it open to? All sorts of speculation. We can make up whatever we want and write a sermon about it that says, take the gods from your father and sit on them. No, don't write sermons like that. All right, so catching up. Why did God intervene in verse 24? Look there, it says, and God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. Why did God intervene? You can cheat and look at verse 29. It won't be cheating because I told you can. What does it say there, verse 29? It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. So what does that tell us about Laban again?
He was going to take his stuff back.
Yep, he was going to take his stuff back, and he was going to do harm to them. They left me. They took all my wealth, what he perceived as his own, and they ran out. So God intervened, of course. And so there's something here about Laban. Now, this is strong enough from God for him to know, don't mess. He had seen God provide for his son-in-law. He had experienced tons of blessing since Jacob had been there, and he recognized that it was his God who had done this. And now this God meets with him and speaks to him and said, don't do anything good or bad to them. Don't harm them, essentially. How would someone truthfully answer the question of Laban in verses 26 to 28? He says, and Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives, taken with the sword? Wherefore, why didst thou flee away secretly and steal away from me, and didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with myrrh, and with songs, with tabret, and with harp? and hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. How would someone truthfully answer the questions of Laban? How could you do this to me? Yeah. Well, yeah, especially after you hear that the Lord says you can't do hurt to me, right? What goes around comes around, buddy. You did it to me. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trust a word that he says, right? Yeah, Dan. Okay, good. Right, right. Good. Very good point. By the way, you don't have anything left to throw a party with, right? What do you find interesting about verses 30 to 35? And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen thy gods? And Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure, thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. So he says, whoever you find your gods with, just you can end their lives. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. So take the idols. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, to Leah's tent, into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images, put them in the camel's furniture, sat upon them, and Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. So what do you find interesting about those verses? Goes a little bit with what Clark mentioned a moment ago. Okay, there's trust with Rachel here, almost taking her word. Okay, yeah. Okay, she's her father's daughter. Yep. And why do you say that?
Well, you compare Rachel with Leah. Leah is obviously a believer in God,
Mm-hmm.
but Rachel, we don't see that really.
Not with what we're reading so far, right? Yep. Strong possibility. The only argument I would pursue against that to a degree is Joseph, right? He seems to have been brought up in such a way, whether that was the closeness to Jacob, which is probably very true because he was favored by Jacob. She does die, and we don't know the age of Joseph at that time. So yeah, the influence there, where was that? But that's the importance of a father's influence with his son. But yeah, no, that's a very valid point. Yep. Totally. Here she's deceiving her dad, right? Where did she learn it? I learned it from dad. Where did he learn it? Well, it just keeps happening. And isn't that maybe a good reason why the Lord said, Abraham, get out of this country and go to this land which I will show to you and I will give to you? Yeah, because the Lord was setting them apart for his use and for his glory to bring his son into the world through this family. Yes, right. And that's what we're seeing, right? Yep. The influence of, parents, right. So, yeah, very good point. So coming together, Jacob hit a breaking point with Laban. What did he say to Laban, which really led to his feelings of animosity toward him? Verse 36, Jacob was wroth, chode with Laban, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge between us both. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and the she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of the flock have I not eaten? That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night? Thus I was. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times, except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me. Surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Okay, this is what? What's happening here? Let it go, right? Yeah, he's like, man, I've been living with you for 20 years, and I'm just going to dump it all on you right now. Have you ever done that before? Sure you have. And how did it feel? It felt great. I don't know about that, but this is what he does, right? I mean, he lays out where he hits this breaking point. What did he say to Laban, which really led to his feelings of animosity toward him? He just told him everything. You've kind of ripped me off, and so I'm going to express that to you. How did Laban's view of everything, I say quotes because everything that was going on, affect his relationship with others? Look at verse 43. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters. These children are my children. These cattle are my cattle. And all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children, which they have borne? Okay, how does Laban's view of everything affect his relationships with others? How do you feel about possessive people? Do you want to be around possessive people? No, we naturally don't want to be around possessive people. Look at Laban here. And now, to a degree, he's looking at it this way. These are my daughters. You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for my daughters. These cattle that you have, they're all from my flocks. You wouldn't have them if it weren't for my flocks. So everything originated with me, right, is essentially what he's looking at and what he's saying. But that's how he viewed things. And I think it affected his relationship with everybody. Yes.
In that culture, there was extreme reverence for your elders, too. They were the ones that had everything, and as they passed on, that was passed down. So he probably did feel that Jacob ripped.
Sure. Yeah, there was extreme reverence for elders. You're right. And it did seem like this. And I'm guessing, too, that Jacob and Laban weren't a great deal, age difference, a great age difference there either. Yes. All right, good. Exactly. Putting himself in the place of God, right? I think that's a great point, because you look at where are these daughters from? Well, we just saw with Jacob, Leah, and Rachel that the offspring are a gift from the Lord, right? The Lord opens the womb, and you have offspring because of the Lord. So you say they're mine, the cattle are yours, but you wouldn't have anything if it weren't for the Lord, right? So everything starts with the Lord. Yeah, excellent, excellent point. So what was the purpose of the covenant made in the final verses here? And I'm not going to read all of this, but there's a covenant made. Stones are put together. And essentially what happens is they say, you're not going to cross over this, where these stones are, to do me hurt. And I'm not going to cross over where these stones are to do you hurt. This is basically the dividing line. We're not going to harm each other. If you come over here, look out. But, so it's just a covenant that is set up. It's just to kind of move on with life. And it has to do with God. And I say that because God spoke to Laban in a dream, and he had to obey. Or I think he feared God enough to know that if he does anything, it might be over. It seems like they were serious about borders. They didn't build a wall, but they did have stones. So what are some takeaways from all this?
Well, we probably shouldn't use verse 49 when we're talking about our Christian brothers and sisters. Probably not a good thing. The Lord watch between
Okay, say that again. Verse 49.
Verse 49.
Okay, and it says in Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. So what do they say that again, brother?
What did I say?
You said something about walking between, so we'll often pray that way.
The point is that sometimes we misuse that passage.
Okay.
And we say, the Lord watch between me and thee. There was no trust there.
Right.
And that isn't a good thing for us.
Yeah, that's right. There was no trust here in this, right? They should have just been able to come together and say, listen, Godspeed to you. I'm not going to hurt you. You know, we're family. And we see that with Jacob and Esau later on, right? Which is a really cool thing. So you're seeing this family leave and you see them come back together, and we're going to see that coming up very soon. Great point. So real quick, we're a little over already. Takeaways. Number one, if the Lord leads, the Lord protects. Okay? Let me say that again. If, or you might say when, the Lord leads, the Lord protects. So let's make sure the Lord is leading. And if he is leading, the Lord protects. Number two, no parting is easy. Okay? When you are, say there's family and you say, okay, we're leaving. It's not going to be easy because there's change involved. So I say this to myself. I have a daughter that's leaving soon, and that's not going to be easy. No parting is easy. And then finally, it's much easier to lead when you know where you're going. So seek the Lord's direction every day. What do I mean? Jacob knew where he was supposed to go. And so he was willing to go. We don't always know where we're supposed to go or what we're supposed to do. So what should we do? Seek the Lord every day. Lord, what do you want me to do? And just ask him the question. And follow him wherever he may lead. All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you for the word tonight. It's a tough passage to read where family is broken up. But it's good for us to see. No parting is easy. Where you do lead, you protect. And I pray that you'll help us to learn valuable lessons here, to be humble, to follow your lead, to be able to go back and say, the Lord did this. We trusted the Lord. We prayed to the Lord. This was not a whim type thing, but we have been following the Lord all the way through. And so help that to be our desire to follow your lead in our lives. God, I pray you'll bless our church family, that you'll use the word in us to shape our thinking, that you'll use it in us to cause us to be salt and light, different, separated from the world, and that we will love you, live for you, and share you with other people. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Brother Bob's going to come and take some prayer requests here tonight, and then probably just